Everyone, thank you for joining the Bluefly Town Hall on July 31st, 2026. We have Daniel Cothran joining us here today to talk about charts and ePub generator and maybe some other things. I feel like that maybe it would be a good idea if you wouldn't mind just introduce yourself here to the anyone who might not know you. But you are a Bluefly member. You've been with us for, I want to say maybe over a year now. I'm not exactly sure what that is.
Probably.
So yeah, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I did prepare a presentation, so let me share my screen.
Okay.
And thanks, Nora, for setting up these slides.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm going to focus talking about ePub generator and the charts module. So here's me. My Drupal.org username is andileco, and for work, I work at JSI.
It looks like that the picture-in-picture thing is happening.
Oh, okay.
Need to move that off to another screen or something. All right. Yeah, it went away.
Yeah, so I'm a Drupal lead for JSI, and in general, I work to apply technology and knowledge management techniques toward public health issues. We are a public health company. My Drupal claim to fame is that I initiated the effort to get Drupal certified as a digital public good, and I love that people are still talking about that. I have this sort of like overall vision of Drupal not just being a content management system, but also being a data management system. And so I've been building a lot of modules that help to manage data, help to visualize data, and charts being the primary one, but there's a lot of other ones. I am a pretty active contributor at this point. I put here at the bottom, I'm a former English major. So like I've always had an interest in publishing. When I was in undergrad, I was the editor-in-chief of our literary magazine. So I had this kind of idea of publishing. And more recently, I've been kind of inspired to look into how to make ebooks with Drupal. So here's the table of content for the presentation. I'll give a little bit of background, and then for the first chapter, I'll talk about ePub generator, and then I'll do a quick demo of ePub generator. And then I'm going to switch over to charts and just give a few little demos of lesser known features in charts that are pretty powerful. And actually, two of them I probably did in like the last 10 minutes before this presentation. So they don't require really any setup to do. Okay, so people have been struggling with reading experience since basically 500 years before Christ. And Drupal's solution has been the book module. It was added to core at around 3.x, or at least according to the, for some reason, translated into French snippet from Koja search engine. The book module is sort of like the Drupal approach to long form content, in that it's a structured content. You basically have a book parent, and then you can create chapters for that book, and you can also create sub-chapters, and you kind of form that type of tree. Unfortunately, from my perspective, book was removed from core, and I think in 11.4, but definitely sometime in 11. However, it is still, there's a contributed module for it, and if you look at the stats for it, there are over 11,000 modern Drupal installs as of like last week. And as people migrate off of Drupal 10, there may be more people coming on board as well. And the book module is also the base for other sort of similar solutions, such as local gov publications. So I think the kind of modern reading experience formats that, well, at least the ones I'm going to talk about are, web page, so viewing a book in Drupal, then the ebook option, which comes in the form of a .epub file, and then obviously PDF. So if you, I'm not going to just read through this table, but I think if you look kind of down the columns, you'll see that for a modern reading experience, ebook really checks most of the boxes. No, it's not for print, and it's not automatically updated. You are getting a snapshot, but it's a really it does generate a good reading experience, and that's probably why Amazon makes quite a lot of money off of Kindle, and there's obviously other services as well. So if you look at the different modern formats, looking down the column, you can see that ebook checks most of the option or most of the requirements. And then if you compare these different formats in terms of accessibility, all three of them can be accessible formats, but ebook really does check all tick all the boxes, and PDF, you have to do a lot of work sometimes to make PDFs accessible. So yeah, I think you can see from this that ePub really is probably a preferred reading format in many cases. I think the reading experience preferred by most Drupal developers might be this. It's I hope I don't hear any laughter. I'm hoping I didn't make Josh laugh. So for those of you who aren't familiar, what is an ePub? It's essentially a zip archive of HTML, CSS, and media. So it's like a little website packaged up in a zip archive, and you can see here the kind of overall structure that you would expect. Chapters, for example, are usually like would be chapter like .html files, and then you'll have like a style sheet and then your assets under a folder like images. And there's lots of like metadata and that type of thing, but it's relatively simple, and it's very like standards heavy. So when I started thinking about this, the first step is always to look and see what Drupal solutions are already available, and sadly there weren't really many, or really any that were feasible in kind of the modern Drupal era. The print module was widely used, but it's a Drupal 7 only module. Entity print has been one of the modules that's kind of risen to replace it, and there's a ticket for ePub support, but it's never been acted on. Yeah, so entity print, there's a ticket, but no one ever acted on it. There's a module called ePub that never made it past Drupal 6.7. And then there's an ePub viewer module that I found, but I examined the code for that, and it's really poor quality code, and it doesn't have a security release. So it's not, there's a few people using it, but if I knew who they were, I would tell them they need a different solution. So chapter 1, ePub generator. Here is the module. It's been on Drupal.org for a few weeks now. It turns Drupal content, including entire book outlines, single nodes, or uploaded markdown files into valid downloadable ePub files, and these can also be viewed in the browser by enabling one of its submodules. It uses a PHP library that I authored with the help of Claude, and there are 3 submodules, one for the book navigation, one for the markdown, and one for the viewer, and I'm going to talk about that in the next slide. So in terms of the requirements, the library needs PHP 8.2 or above with the following extensions, which is like pretty standard. And then there's the core module that has a generator service. It has a HTML to XHTML sanitizer, and this is also what allows for the per node download option. And then the ePub generator book module, which requires book version 3 or greater, assembles multi-chapter books from a book outline into a nested table of contents, pulling in the metadata from fields that are on the root node of the book. The ePub generator viewer allows you to read those books in the browser using epub.js from FuturePress. And the markdown file is essentially a file formatter that has a button that allows you to download the markdown file as an ePub. So there is a setup screen in the first tab, the generator tab, that stores overall metadata defaults. It sets up the styling, like you can put in a path to a custom style sheet. There's a place to strip selectors that you don't want included in your book. That could include like some of the book navigation that you would have in Drupal in order to really be able to traverse the book. And then it also sets which entity types and bundles can host ePub generation. The viewer settings configures some of the reader settings, as well as the route is cached so that you don't just like hammer your machine by like visiting the same path over and over again. And then there's also a mapping tab that contains a button that actually generates all the kind of default metadata fields that you need and maps those to basically the settings that get read by the module. And you can also override some of those some of the fields that are providing the data on a content type basis. So who might want this module? Government agencies and their contractors. So I posted the other day on LinkedIn about part of the reason that I liked the idea for this module is we built an entire website which was essentially the book module, and it was this guidance that gets generated by the government every like 10 years, and it's used like in healthcare setting. And you kind of had the option of looking online, which had a lot of great features, like you could hover over highlighted words and it would give you the definition and all that. So it was like a very rich reading experience. But for clinicians, sometimes they need to refer to these things while they're in a clinical setting. They might not really, like the website might not really be the most appropriate way to access some of that information. And a PDF certainly wouldn't do the job either. So an ePub would have been really helpful in that situation. We don't maintain that site anymore, so it's not really an option for us. But the other situation I think would be useful for this would be like the local gov publications module. That is on book 2, but as soon as that's on book 3, I've already created a module that would allow this module to work with local gov publications. I could also see nonprofits and think tanks who are coming out with longer documents to want to have something that people could download on their e-reader and have maybe a more pleasant reading experience. Universities are publishing things all the time. Industry groups, if they're wanting to publish white papers or something like that, you could use this module and maybe have like some sort of commerce feature that blocks people from being able to download it until they've like paid for the white paper or something like that. Obviously, publishers or independent authors might benefit from this. If you use Google Docs, you can actually generate an ePub from a Google Doc. But if you want to have a website that also automatically converts to an ePub, then you could use this module. And then I could also see this being interesting for librarians and libraries. So with that, let me go ahead into my demo. So this is a book that I found on a website that basically hosts books that are out of copyright. And so I created a little module that just basically imported all the content from an ePub into my Drupal site so that I would have enough content to give a good demo. So this is the parent node. I'm just going to let you see the back end really quickly. So we have title, the body that's going to show up on the page itself. I put the author here, subtitle. So if you have some of these other fields, you could put those in. There's a space for a cover image. And then if you want to, you can also modify the ePub layout. So if you're wanting to have like a picture book versus more of like a novel, you can play with some of these settings, but you don't have to. And then there's a description field that goes onto the title page. So you can see the navigation outline. Just click on one of them. Lots of content here. So there's, like I said, there's two different ways to view this as an ebook. If you want to just stay in the browser and have maybe a more pleasant reading experience, there's a tab here to read online. So you can see this was where that description was. Here's the author, here's the subtitle. And then I can navigate the outline here. It's got the kind of typical navigation that you would see in a ebook reader. But if you want to take this, offline, you can click download ePub. So I'm going to just put it here. And then double click. I have a Mac, so I have the books application. So you can see it's opened up in here. Here's the navigation. I can swipe through it. I can click on chapters and it'll take me there. Yeah, so one thing I want to point out here is you can see this. This is actually the navigation menu. And I don't want that in my ebook, right? So what I'm going to do is, let me see. So I'm going to go to configuration. ePub generator, and there's a strip selectors section here. So I'm going to put book navigation here in the strip selectors. And then should I need to clear the caches? I'm just going to navigate to the end of a chapter. Is it still sharing? Oh, I think it went away, didn't it?
Yeah, it went away.
Right now my computer is blurry.
And you're back.
Okay, so here you can see this looks like the end of a chapter, and that, yeah, that navigation menu is no longer showing up here. So that's a nice feature. Another thing that I wanted to mention is the viewer module. It also has a file formatter. So I just took an article content type and I added a ePub file field. And then I uploaded this book to that field and then set the settings for the file formatter to display the ePub content. So this is another nice feature. Here is the markdown file. So I can click download as ePub. So you can see so here's the file that I had uploaded to that. And then I think node 1. Oops. Yeah, so this is just a node. It's not a book. And with this one, I can download ePub, and it again. And in this case, it will just draw some like the author from the node author and that kind of thing. So that is pretty much the that's pretty much the ebook generator. It's a lot of power there, and I think we'll handle a lot of different use cases. I'm looking forward to people actually starting to use this module and getting some real feedback, not just like from myself. But I'm going to switch back over to my presentation and go into chapter 3, which is talking about some of the chart's less known features. One of them, which I'm going to actually save to the end, is kind of an escape hatch. So charts is set up in a way where we limit the different chart types that you can use and some of the settings based off of what's kind of, well, we only support certain chart types that we've really had time to work on. And for most of the settings, we try to make those universal settings across any charting library. So you can, if you're using the charts API, you can always override. We have like a raw options setting at various levels. But those are still gated by some of the settings like chart type. So like if you were using that, you can't just add a chart type that's not supported by the module. This escape hatch, basically, it runs before some of those different validation checks are in place. And so you can basically take any like demonstration chart that you can see on any of the supported charting libraries and just either get it as a JSON string or as an array and just set your render element with chart definition to the definition of that particular chart, and it will render that in your page. And I'm going to try to demo that last. The next one is as Canvas has started to become more popular and getting pushed, we knew we needed to create a more simplified form for the charts module because the current one has a lot of different features. It uses Ajax several places, and it just wouldn't work with the way that the Canvas is set up so far. So we created a custom form that can be used within blocks. It doesn't have to be used within blocks. So if you prefer the editing experience, you can use that. So here is a newly created Canvas page, and I just grabbed the chart Canvas block right here, pulled it into the page, and then I added a title, so I can change this. There's two different data entry formats. You can use JSON or CSV. So I'm using JSON, and I just basically grabbed it from the instructions. So I can instead do CSV, and I'm going to grab that from here. But anyway, this is a really nice way to be able to preview, your chart immediately. Okay, thanks. Yeah, I don't know. I can't see the reason it's not showing there. Oh, did it go away again?
Yep.
Put it on the side. All right. And you can see. I think this is pretty cool. And the other nice thing about it is, so right now the charting library is just my site default. But if I want to switch it to another charting library, there's Chart.js. Here is Google. Here's Billboard. So you can kind of instantly compare how your chart would look in different libraries. That was one of the things I wanted to show. The next one is CK editor charts. So if you have a node, I've just set up a text filter. So config, after enabling the module, go to content, authoring, text formats, and editors. I'm using the full HTML one. So you configure that. You drag this icon, which will be up here, into the active toolbar. And then down here, you have to check charts text filter. That's all the setup that you need. So I'm just going to put my cursor in here, click this. So this is the normal charts form that you would see like on a charts field or a charts block. I'm going to just quickly create. And then a new feature that we've added is we can set the chart type at the series level, which allows you to have combo charts. So I'm going to add another column. Make this a no. I'm going to set this to be a column. And before I do anything else, I'm just going to come up here to the preview section and preview it. If this is what I want my chart to look like, then I can basically just insert chart. Do that. But whoops, I didn't make this a full HTML, so I'll have to do that again. But anyways, it would insert it here. You can just see where it is, but currently you can't really do much with it. All right, let me just do a quick one. Get something, insert. So it looks like that. Save it. And then there's your chart. Another feature that we've added to charts recently is the ability to have like a toggleable data table or a data table that shows all the time. This is to help with accessibility. So this is actually, I think this needs to be refreshed or something like, this was the one I had created originally. So that's an interesting, what I would say, bug right now. But anyway, this demonstrates how that works.
What's the hamburger button on the right do?
This one, so this is a high chart specific feature, and it allows you to like view it in full screen, print. You can download like images of it, or there is a data table option here. So high charts is the only of the libraries that really offers many accessibility options, if any. So something that's nice about this is it's actually sort of like an accessibility layer for any of the charting libraries. So it's sort of like lifting all boats, like a high tide lifting all boats.
So the insert into CK editor is completely new feature?
That is a separate module, actually.
Gotcha.
So you do the 2.x version. Okay, we have 5 minutes, so we want to try that last Easter egg, or would people like to ask? Maybe we could do questions instead.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, anybody want to chime in? Anybody using charts that they want to talk about?
Well, I just want to say thank you for all the work that you've done, what you did with the public good for Drupal, and what you've done with the charts, and just in general, the amount of time and energy you've put into Drupal, into the open source, community. Just thank you for all that.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. And in the case of ePub generator, also a lot of tokens.
Yeah. Your screen share did go away again. I don't know if you intended that, but
you bring up a really good point. Like, contributing these days isn't just time.
Yeah. Any questions?
Are you looking for any help with contrib, towards any of these things, or testing of some kind?
Yeah, testing is always great. The thing that I've found the biggest challenge is a lot of people talk about, oh, there's like all this code that gets submitted and then you need to have reviewers, and like that is true. But for me, the bigger challenge is actually having people volunteering to test out different features and or just to provide feedback at all. You sort of like put things out into a void, you don't hear back, and sometimes it's good you're not hearing anything because it means it's working. And other times you just don't know.
And I see a chat says the canvas and chart demo was quite cool. I already have a couple of use cases for ePub as well. Oh, so it's good to hear that we have some folks that might be using that here soon. How would best folks be able to contribute? Is it through issue queue issues or channel somewhere?
Yeah, I would say starting with I'm always on Slack, so you can reach out to me, like DM me in the Drupal Slack if you just want to ask a question, talk about it. I think if you see a bug, put that in the issue queue and we'll work from there.
Another chat here. A client is using Book for their student handbook and board policies. I'll ask them if they want an ePub download to give this a try. So we have, maybe a new signee there as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
and the nice thing
go
ahead.
Sorry about that, Daniel. I'll just say I spoke to Johan the other day about the braid list and how he could be utilizing this. And Johan, it might be worth having a conversation with him too.
Okay. Yeah, and the nice thing about everything I've shown is you can really, these are just working pretty much like as soon as you install them. Charts defaults to, if you don't have the libraries installed, which is, a challenge for more like a site builder type user, it defaults to using a CDN for all those libraries. So I didn't actually locally install any of those charting libraries. It's just reaching out to them. And then if you do have the libraries locally, you use those instead of using the CDN, so that it kind of overrides that. And you can also turn off the CDN option for security reasons too.
What are reasons for folks to use their own versus the CDN version?
Like supply chain types of things. So like if maybe there's a 0 day that emerges in a different version or something like that, and then you're pulling from it. It could be like that. So you can peg to a specific version, or update more quickly as well, if you have them locally.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us here today and demoing the new things that you have going on in your space. It looks like we have at least a couple folks here that are already thinking about using the ePub generator. Welcome to have you back, at some point as well, if you have more features to talk about, drum up some additional attention. So thank you again for joining us here today, Daniel, and y'all have a great weekend.